I have final rounds literally like within the same week of two companies, and they were both going to be giving me an offer within the same time frame.
Hi, and welcome back to this channel. My name is Jörg, which is German for George, here at Find a Job in Germany. And with me today is JD. For your information, everyone, we already had a recording with JD. In the first session, we were talking about the obstacles, the challenges that JD was facing, finding a job in Germany as a QA engineer. And in this second part now, we want to talk about something very specific, which has to do with the process of JD finding a job in Germany. And that is JD, you getting two offers, ending up with two offers in your hand. And I remember you texting us about it in the WhatsApp group chat. And you were like, okay, guys, I may end up having to make a decision here. And you got a little nervous. We had a
Yes.
call. I gave you my input, and in principle, it turned out nicely, turned out well. But we want to really talk about today, how do you assess an employer? How do you make the right decision going forward? JD, maybe you want to just share from the top of your head how it all began, not just with this company necessarily, but also maybe with other companies, and what you felt when it was about doing interviews, first rounds, and assessing them. Because I told you from the beginning, it's not a one-way street, man. You need to check them out. So, what would you
Yes.
like to share as a first start?
Yeah. So I had two different job positions I was applying for. One company was a senior QA engineer, and the other one was a QA test manager. And so I was applying for this one company for the senior QA role, and they were they were great. Like the first interview went really well, and they provided me a tech assignment, and this was in the long run. So their interview process was pretty slow. And then in the meantime, I then had while I was finishing the second round interview with the senior QA role, I had the first round interview for the test management role at the other company. And I talked to them, and she was saying, I told her that I was in the process with another interview process with this other company. I just want to let you know. And she's like, yeah, that's no problem. And so I just asked her, so how does the second round work? How do they approach it? And they actually approached the second round differently. They told me, well, because of AI and ChatGPT being available, they actually don't do the code assessments anymore. They will just have you talk with somebody from the tech department directly. So they're just going to test you on the things that you actually know. And so they'll go into a bit more depth because they kind of just want to skip the whole code assessment thing and just like assess you directly in person. And and so the first company I was applying for, the roles were a bit, the interview process was pretty long, the phases were longer, and the second company, the phases were a lot shorter. I had the first round, and then they had a follow-up interview with me probably like the following week on a Monday.
It felt
Um,
differently already, huh?
it felt different, yeah. Very more charismatic with the HR recruiter, but I was like, okay, maybe it's just the HR, like it's very different. And then the second round interview that I had, yeah, and he was the tech lead in the entire IT department, and he was very charismatic, and he was being relatable with me, and I felt very comfortable talking with him. He was like, I started in like consulting and support. I wasn't even in the IT department, and so it just showed me that he is just a human being, and he eventually just through commitment at the company, he got to the position that he's at. So he didn't like make me feel like I was being completely overanalyzed, and he just wanted me to feel comfortable and just have a discussion about tech. And that's really all these interviews are. It's just having a conversation with somebody. Don't get overwhelmed on it. And that's how it felt with that company. The final rounds, they were starting to overlap coming to the same end. And that's where I started getting overwhelmed. I started realizing, okay, I have final rounds literally like within the same week of two companies, and they were both going to be giving me an offer within the same time frame. And so I was getting nervous because the second company that I was applying for gave me an offer and a contract like almost immediately after the third round interview that I had with them.
Exactly.
Um, and so that put pressure on me. And also, I want to mention that when I did receive this contract or this offer, they gave me a date saying that I didn't have to reply to them for a week later. When I told them I'm going to think about the offer, I still have to have a final interview and a follow-up offer with the other company. Then all of a sudden, they were trying to apply pressure onto me, saying, well, it would be really great if you can actually answer us this week. And just keep in mind, this is a tactic that they're definitely doing. This is what I had a discussion with Jörg about because I was feeling overwhelmed. I was like, oh my God, like I need to like figure this out now. I'm freaking out, and Jurg's like, no, no, no. Listen, like it is, it is possible that they may have other candidates, but like, don't let them bully you into signing something without making sure that you go over it all first and give the opportunity to interview the other company. Because honestly, the decision sometimes will be far more clear when you have the interview, when you have the final round interview with both companies.
Exactly.
Because
So, what it comes down to really, one has to be able or put oneself in the position of making an informed decision. How do you make an informed decision? You gather as much information as you can. It starts in a first round. It goes through the tech rounds. It does not necessarily end in the final round, but generally that's where you're left with all the information that you've gathered. The kinds of questions that they ask you, the way
mhm,
that they, receive your responses, the way they make you feel during the interview, all these things. And Jay, you just mentioned this. You had this one call with that one company, charismatic on the one hand, that doesn't have to say a lot, but it's a good first pointer.
mhm.
And in the end, it was a compilation or a collection. It was a whole, let's say, feeling that kind of got nourished over the rounds, where this positive impression of yours was maintained, would you say, right? Whereas
Yes, absolutely.
you also talked about imposter syndrome in the first session, actually, that we're recording. And I like that very much. I appreciate your honesty and your openness here because everyone feels like that in any kind of situation in life, unless you're running a country, I guess. But you being in an environment where they make you feel comfortable, that is a very good sign that they do respect people in general, and there is a good culture at place. Now, for that one final round, I told you to explicitly look out for one thing. When you go there, because they invited you to their office in Munich, um, what did I tell you to do? What did I tell you to look out for? You remember?
Yeah, definitely. It's so funny that you mentioned that. I also just want to give a bit of follow-up information that leads us there.
Please.
So first off, I was talking with the HR of the first company I was interviewing with. I said, "Hey, listen, I just received an offer from this other company I'm interviewing for. Is it possible that we can get together a bit sooner, or can we land on a day to receive like either a verbal offer or PDF?" And I did not get a response until the day I had to go into the office to have the final round with them. And that just told me what I was discussing with Jurg on the phone because I was telling him they're not talking to me. Maybe I should just close it with the other offer. And he's like, no, 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 just go, just see. You never know, right? Because it's very possible
Don't know till
things
you
do
know.
happen. And so the day of, I decided to give one more call before I went and did the final interview. And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see the email. I didn't receive your voicemail. I'll have to talk with the CEO or the board to see if we can make this happen for you. Are you coming in today?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm still coming. Thank you for at least answering the call. I'll see you later." And so that just told me when I was talking with Jurg about this that like they probably don't have a great management staff. So that kind of gives you a bit of information how that company is being operated. Maybe it's very startup and very early stages. And it's not a great, it's kind of a red flag, folks.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
because I called three separate times, like 3 days before I did the final interview, and I gave her two emails to give her notice on what's happening with this other company. And she called me and told me that I was their final candidate, you know? So if I'm considered a final candidate, then that should say that I'm, important enough to at least give me information
Yeah.
so I can work
Yeah.
with them, you know?
Having worked in HR or having done recruiting over so many years and having seen so many companies and their processes from the inside, I can honestly say they should have, but did not roll out the red carpet for you. And
Right.
that was also what I told you. You need to check them out for their processes. Do they have processes in place for things? A good company will have processes in place for anything. Ideally, they're automated, but in many cases they're still not, but that's perfectly fine as long as you get the feeling that these processes are in place. Now, you then went there and you also talked to a bunch of other people,
Yes. Okay. So now we're going to follow up with my assessment of the company and the employers. And as you said, it may be an automated like template of like how they roll out the red carpet for you, but it shows there's structure in the company, which is good because structure means organization and it means less stress on you
Absolutely.
in the company. So I show up and Jurg mentioned this one thing, which I thought was a very key takeaway, which is assessing the relationships of the coworkers within that company. How are they communicating with each other? And to prepare like 10 questions, but not just basic bare bones questions. Follow up with additional questions for each question you have. Because what I've noticed is that when you do the interview with them, um, you're going to be able to see how they're going to respond and how they're going to be like responding with like their colleague because just based on their facial recognition and their eyes like and how they seem to have their communication, if it seems off, then you know that there's probably some sort of weird bureaucracy going on in there where
Super
um
important, super important. And
yeah.
culture and process, that's where culture and processes merge. You
Yes.
are always able to assess, even from afar. You don't have to be at the office. You can also do this from India. I'm just saying. But you need to let your gut feeling and your life experience play a vital role here. You can assess two things with a company, culture and processes to a certain degree. And this
Yeah.
is where they merge. And you were live there and you were internally, you told me afterwards, you were rolling your eyes and you were saying, oh God, this is now so much clearer to me. I know that I want to go with the other company.
Yeah, like it started off with this. Like I get there and so I get there 15 minutes early, as you should. It's good to be formal. Um, it's a formality, right? And I arrive and they bring me in the kitchen, they offer me soda, basic things. But then I notice the CEO and the CTO, the chief executive officer, I think is CEO. Anyway, the two co-founders of this company. That's the first round interview that I was having with them in the final, and I had to sit down with them. And the CEO was fairly young, actually. I'm pretty certain he was probably 28 years old. Which is crazy. So, he's big brain guy. Um,
That's cool.
but which is cool. But he was not comfortable of just like there was no calm demeanor. He was fidgeting in his seat. He was standing up. He was looking at his computer. Like, I don't know if he was faking it or what. It
Did
was a
not have his
very
priorities set straight, that's for sure.
did not have his priorities set straight. So it seemed like he was very stressed and he had a lot of things that he still had to handle while interviewing me. And so when I had these questions prepared that Jurg suggested, I was prolonging the interview a little bit just to see how they were going to handle like
Good job.
the time.
Good job.
And it made him like not want to leave because he knew it was unprofessional. But that showed me that I'm not a priority. I'm just another number. And when I was asking questions, he was looking over to his colleague to help him to maybe answer and stuff. And his colleague, I wouldn't say out of fear, but like out of like, out of the tendency of like, okay, why do you want to do QA? And I'm like, that's a really weird question to ask. Like
And
this late
also,
in the
didn't we
game.
already have a first round in which somebody asked me this, and was this information not shared with you? Again, processes. So,
Exactly. And the CEO just looked at my resume for the first time in that final round. Yeah,
recruiting 101, and it's bad. And this
bad.
is what I want to say. You wanna on the one hand, of course, appreciate a company giving you the offer of interviewing with them, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the point, but it's not just about them assessing you. That's so important here. And you already told me on the phone, yeah, I came there that like a kicker table, one of these foosball tables, right?
Yeah,
Everything looked pretty cool and hip, and
yeah.
then it was pretty shallow.
I definitely just want to mention this for everybody that's listening too. That is all just basic 90s tech startup
It's like
template of how it's
cliche.
formatted. Yeah, very cliche. Foosball table, a PlayStation sitting in the corner, the flat screen TV collecting lots of dust because nobody's got time to do any of that stuff anyway. Don't let that stuff fool you, okay? You're like every company's got this. It doesn't mean that they're like, Google.
Exactly. And I cannot imagine how many people in this world are just submissive to an employer like that because they feel like they owe it to them, that being given the opportunity is so great. Yeah, you say that to them, but deep
Hmm.
down, have some dignity and protect yourself before you jump on board. You want to really check them out. And we
Yes.
we we talked about a few things, and being there really helped, huh?
Oh my God. Like I think like right in the middle of that interview with the co-founders, like I knew immediately my decision was made right there. Because even right after I was supposed to have another interview session with just like the QA colleagues, but they didn't after our interview was done, I was like, okay, so where do I got to go for the second interview? They didn't even know where to direct me. They didn't even know who it was going to be with. And so then they bring me to, I'm like, I'm pretty certain it's with the QA colleagues. That he brings me over and she was like, oh, well, like I thought we already did this. Like it was just only a get to know you type thing. Like we did this when he just arrived.
Hmm.
And so I had reserved time to do that. And that already just told me, okay, all right. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go.
It's 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 really important that we keep on emphasizing this, and that's what this YouTube video is really all about. You may have heard good things, great things, even the greatest things about German companies, German corporate culture. That is by itself a very, very short-sighted statement
Mhm.
because you cannot just generalize things like that. You need to take a individualized look at each and every company. Yes, the overall culture may be different compared to what you're used to, depending on the country that you're from. And surely most people say good things. But that
Yes.
does not mean that you're going to end up with a great company by default. Not at all.
No, and that's the thing is that when I was there, I realized too is that like also keep a I found this out too from doing physical interviews. I had another physical interview with another company as well, and I realized that the office format was the same. When the QA department and the developers are working on like two different levels in a building and they're not working together, that's going to make your job harder. Like there's some key aspects to that as well, because then you have to go down and talk with the developers in person to talk about your testing, because it's easier to have like an ensemble of people in person at least once or twice a week to actually have these discussions with them. Unless if it's 100% remote, which I totally understand, but sometimes the physical, if it's a hybrid environment where it's necessary for you to be in there, and say it's a startup company, you're gonna have a lot more work. So you have to establish a lot of things in the company, and it's harder to do that if not everybody's in the same area. And I
Mm,
noticed that was with Reeve as well. Um, but yeah, unfortunately they dropped the ball on quite a few things. The management with the HR recruiter, they didn't have it well structured. When I came in for the final round, they didn't get back to me, and they weren't giving
mm.
me the necessary attention that they should have.
The reason
Um,
why we did this video today is really because you told me about this, and I was able and gladly able to really look over your shoulder while you were doing this because you called me and you wanted some help, etc. So I was gladly able to do that. In the end, really, you can make 100K, but if the people suck, if the company sucks, the structures suck, the systems suck, your life
mhm.
is going to be miserable. And
Yep,
in the end, this is why you should not just be bowing to them from the beginning until the very end. Yes, companies do provide tickets, especially when you're relocating to another country. They will be your ticket that your visa is based on, but you can totally skip that, or you take it and then you change the employer when you're here. But do not be miserable. That does not help anyone. That is not sustainable for your life in Germany, especially when you've never lived in Germany, especially when your second job is making friends. Passing probation and making
yes,
friends is when you're in a new country, that's what I like to say, should be your top priority. If you already have a network, that is perfectly fine then. But even then, for that instance, you want to check them out carefully, no matter what. That's a chore. That's just the way it is.
yep. That's part of being an immigrant in a foreign country. I am one. And
Welcome.
German is hard.
Yep, welcome.
But honestly, I know this is not really valid for this, but I could just say is that when you make a friend in Germany, it's a very liable friend to have. Um, they're a tougher nut to crack, but once you crack it, you got a loyal friend for a long time.
That's really cool. Thank you so for saying that to everyone. That's also part of being here and living here. It's just not the job that you're coming for. But
They
of
love
course,
commitment.
they do. They do. They want to see where they're putting their investment in and that it's really going to be worth their while and, sustainable. But that really also means join a company with a network of people that mean you well, that respect you for who you are. And again, you can totally assess that from the very beginning. How do you guys also join after work? Do you have anything like that in place? How do you generally have feedback rounds? What's your corporate culture on feedback in general? Is there a culture in place? If so, what does it look like? I mean, the
Yeah.
catalog of questions that you can prepare for yourself is endless. And if they want you, they're going to take the time to interview you for it. And unlike the CEO in JD's example, they should be catering for everybody's needs. In a good company, it doesn't really matter whether or not you're the cleaning person or you're the CEO. I would say that because at least in terms of respect, in terms of who you're spending time with and making sure that everybody's issues is resolved, that should be the approach. I'm not saying that the cleaning person is the same asset as the CEO, but the way that you deal with people in general and people are dealing among another in a
Mhm.
corporate environment says so many things already.
Really does. It really helped clarify my choices because I was actually so overwhelmed near the end. But I knew that the other, like my second, like the QA test manager position, I was already liking them so much, and I actually had the tendency of just wanting to close a contract immediately because I loved it. But sometimes if you you can receive a counter offer, and sometimes it could go positive, right?
Mm,
Sometimes it's not always this negative side where it's like, oh, it's pretty clear that this is just not a great
mm,
environment. But if Jörg had not given me the motive to stay underground, be be professional and follow through because you did invest a lot of time. through the interview process, it's only appropriate to at least hear them out. And I'm glad I did
Absolutely.
because you never know. It could go the other way. Sometimes they'll just be like, "Hey, you know what? We really like you. Here's what we got for you." And sometimes it could be like, "Wow, that's really good. Now I'm gonna have to talk to the other company." Like, who knows? It's like ping pong sometimes.
Exactly. And it's perfectly fine for you to also ask for 24 or 48 hours to consider. Nobody should be pushing anyone. In that case, I said that was the only odd thing that I did not like as much about the other employer. But then again, it's also their sign of showing that they really want you. So that is totally forgivable, but I would
Yeah.
say they were also okay with you getting back to them on Monday, and the world didn't end just because you didn't get back to them with feedback on Friday.
And just like
So
what Jörg is
it's
saying,
okay to
yeah.
push back gently a little bit. Don't let them rule your life, huh?
Exactly. I think it was really like Jörg was saying, it's like it's a pressure tactic. They want you. Um, just suggest like you just want to figure out how much leeway you can get with like of giving an answer. You'd be like, well, look, like this Friday is still pretty short notice. Is it possible I can do Monday? They'll usually say it's no problem.
Of
Just be
course,
like,
that's adequate. That is within
yeah,
business adequate periods. So.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
perfect.
worked out.
JD. JD, thank you so much for sharing this. We've never had a recording about this kind of scenario, and this is why I really appreciate you sharing, taking your time. And for everyone else who's interested in our program, the way that we coach people throughout and help them find a job in Germany, you can go ahead, of course, get your info from the website, findajobingermany.de, or you watch our video training, which also gives you things in a more compact form, understand how we work, what we do exactly, and the pricing, of course. But in principle, you can book your get to know call, see whether or not it's a fit. That is the best way forward. And then further down the road, you're going to be talking to one of us, co founders, most likely, before we then assess that this is going to be a good match. In your case, it turned out great, JD. I knew I had a feeling.
Yes.
I just couldn't tell you before. I don't do that.
Well, thank you so much. I honestly sign up, guys. The value is beyond the price, in my opinion, almost. It is, you get so much back in return. It's
Oh, thank
worth
you.
every penny.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And
Welcome.
again, all the best to everyone out there. Take care. See you soon. And bye bye. Tschüss.
Cheers.